Hello and welcome to the Kick in the Creatives podcast, hosted by myself, Sandra Busby, and my fellow creative Tara Roskell, offering you interviews, inspiration, motivation, and a gentle prod in the right direction. And for lots more information, challenges, and other useful tools to help you get creating, you can go to www.kickinthecreatives.com. And of course, this is where you can also find today's show notes. Enjoy the show.
In today's interview, we are talking to Ian Fennelly. Ian is an urban sketcher who paints and sells his amazing sketches. His work mainly features buildings and street scenes which are painted with vibrant colours which complement his lively line work. Not only is Ian a fantastic painter, he is also very entertaining and had some really interesting stories which he shares in the podcast. We hope you enjoy the show.
Okay, well, I want to go back to the beginning.
Okay.
So I would like to know, when did your love for drawing first begin?
Okay, probably, I mean, I can't think of a specific time, but if I go right back to when I was like a baby artist, when I was kind of at school, it was the thing that I was always good at. I was always better at drawing than I was at kind of anything else. So I think that's where the love develops, because you get a lot of confidence from people saying, you know, you're good at this, and so I think that's how it kind of nurtures itself, because, you know, as a child you're starting to get an awful lot of satisfaction from doing it. But my earliest recollections is just, you know, copying things, copying cartoons, copying record sleeves, copying logos, doing a lot of kind of like calligraphy things. So I think that's how it developed, and the love just came from, I suppose, my perception was that I was kind of good at it, and other people thought I was good. So it's like a kind of fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? That the more you do, the better you become, and the more people say, you know, you are on the right kind of tracks. So I think the love has been there for a long time, but I probably love it more now than I've ever done, and I'm probably, I wouldn't say I'm doing more now. I'm probably actually doing less. But I think what I do now, I put everything into it. You know, it gets every kind of urban sketch, every drawing, every painting, gets 100%. So I think the love developed a long time ago, and it's still there. And I think I'd like to think that comes out in the work that I do as well. That, you know, there is a huge amount of passion for what I create.
I was going to say, actually, yes, I think that's definitely the case with your drawings. You can tell that you love doing it. The enjoyment's all over the page. It's lovely.
Yeah. I think it's a very indulgent way of working. And when people come on my workshops and demonstrations, they kind of see how I just bounce around the page, bounce around the picture, you know, picking up pens and brushes and playing around with colour all the time. And it is just, it's playing. It's like giving every picture, you know, everything you've got, throwing everything at it, and just getting as much joy and excitement out of it. It's a real kind of creative journey, you know, for me still. I mean, I've been doing it for a long time, but I'm still making it all up as I go along.
Well, you said excitement, and excitement is exactly the way I would have put when I've seen your work. It's so different to other people's work, I think, I've seen. But
you know, I don't know why, because to me it's the most natural way of drawing. I mean, I don't force a style on what I do. It's just how I create things. It's kind of how I see stuff as well. You know, I think it goes right back to your vision and how you see the world around you, and that's kind of how I see things. I just see those sorts of colours and shapes and angles and textures and details and stuff. And so to me, I guess I kind of think, well, why doesn't everybody just draw and paint like me? Because it's the most obvious way of doing it.
Wouldn't be very good for you, though.
No, it wouldn't. And there's plenty of people out there who do kind of copy what I do. Yeah, there's a few people that have been on my workshops recently, and they've obviously picked up every single tip I've thrown at them, and so they're quite happily working away now and just using every single tip or trick or thing that and there's one person in particular who has revisited lots of the locations that I've been on in the last year, and has actually sat in the same position and has drawn exactly the same view of Amsterdam and Edinburgh and Oxford, and if he's listening to this now, he'll know exactly who he is.
Do you find that frustrating, or would you prefer them to just take what you tell them and to kind of bring it to their own work somehow?
It doesn't, because there's people out there who have obviously been inspired by me, and have picked up loads and loads of tips and tricks and use a lot of the materials that I use, and perhaps choose similar compositions to me, and that's great, because that's me teaching and helping and supporting them, and I really don't mind that. I think it's when people don't recognise, they don't mention that they've been on one of your workshops, or they don't acknowledge it, or they just put stuff out on social media, whether it's Instagram or Facebook, and there's absolutely no mention that they've been on one of my workshops, and that's when it kind of can be a little bit frustrating. I mean, I don't get upset about it, but you just think, well, it would have been nice to say, you have just done 4 workshops with Ian Fennelly, and this is why you're using all the brush pens and the fine liners, and that's why you've chosen that particular view, because you've seen me do it. You've actually stood there and watched me do it for 3 hours, and then the next day you've gone back and you've drawn it from exactly the same view, but there's absolutely no mention. So it's a bit frustrating, yeah, but I mean, I'm not going to lose sleep over it, because when I was a student, I would have been inspired by lots of kind of artists from the past, and picked up their ideas and their tips and studied them and all this kind of thing, and that's what the visual world is all about, isn't it? It's all about helping and supporting, and so it's going to happen, and it doesn't really bother me. It's just something that you can be a bit frustrated by if they don't kind of acknowledge that they've been on a workshop with you. Yeah.
So you mentioned like learning from different people when you were at school and college. So I take it you did go to the traditional route and go to art college.
Yeah. So I went down to London when I was 18. I went down to Wimbledon School of Art and did a fine arts degree down there. And I've kind of been painting the same picture ever since. My pictures, with a few exceptions, are all kind of about me trying to orientate myself in a busy space. So it's all about me coming to terms with all the shapes and patterns and colours and energy that surround me. That's kind of essentially what I do in every picture. If it's a cityscape, I mean, if it's not a cityscape, it's a bit different, but normally it's me in a really busy space. So when I went down to London, that's what kind of inspired me, just being in London and wanting to work out what was around the corner, what was across that bridge, what was through that alleyway. So that's why I make art. I make art as a way of understanding the space that I'm in, and that permeates throughout every urban sketch that I do and every urban sketch that I teach. So that was really significant for me when I was a lot younger, going to art college and finding other artists that didn't quite do the same thing but did similar sort of things. But I'll tell you a quick little story. When I was at college, in my first year at Wimbledon, we had lots of visiting tutors who came along, and one of them was this American guy. I can't remember I can remember his name, but I won't mention it. And he was an abstract expressionist. He did these massive big abstract pictures, and we're all like completely enthralled by him because he'd had a big sellout show in New York, and we got him into Wimbledon to talk to us, and we're all like dead excited. And I was kind of like quite into abstract art at the time, and I could have gone either way. But he turned up and he was pissed. When he turned up, he was drunk. And so we had a load of questions for him. And one of the questions was why do you paint these kind of pictures? And his answer was, because it makes me lots of money. So and then the student wanted to push him even further and said, well, why'd you choose those colours? And he was so blasé about it all, and it purely was a money-making thing for him. There was no substance to it. There was no meaning. There was no personal reference. It was just purely a way of making money. And it kind of completely shattered my whole illusion of possibly going down that route. And I think that the significant thing was that sometimes you learn things from seeing what you don't want to do, don't you? It's seeing the opposite. Somebody presents themselves, and you think, that's not what I want to do. And that really reaffirmed that I just wanted to go down the representational, figurative route. And I'll never forget that story. It happened in my first year at college. I can't mention the guy's name.
I was going to ask if you were, when you were at college, were you drawing outside still? Were you going outside to do scenes? Or
I was, but mostly inside, because we weren't really encouraged at college to be outside because the tutors, had to keep tabs on us. So I used to go off to places like Brixton and Wandsworth, and some of the kind of suburbs where there was lots of street stuff going on, and draw. But then we were kind of forced to come back into the studio and work from the drawings and do much bigger pictures, which was great because it was a learning thing, and the tutors wanted to be around, so they could kind of guide you and tell you, what you were doing wrong. So a lot of my work was started outside, like sketches and references and things like that. But the actual pieces themselves were developed kind of in the studio, where everybody else was. But going back to what I said before, the actual inspiration of being in the city, that all kind of started when I was really young. That started when I was at college or even younger. So in that sense, I think I'm really lucky that I found my subject at a very, very early age, and I've just been able to play with it ever since.
So your style then, you kind of already knew it. You kind of haven't changed much, I presume, since then, apart from maybe improving. But So my next question really was going to be, how did your art develop from there? But has it?
Yeah, it has massively. I mean, there's things I can do now that I couldn't do when I grew. I mean, probably everything I do now I couldn't have done when I was a student. So when I was a student, you can see the world around you. You can see the shapes, you can see the colours, you can see a doorway, you can see a crack, but you don't notice it in quite the same way because you haven't got that kind of experience to draw upon. So when I go somewhere now, so like next week I'm going to Slovenia and I'm doing a load of workshops in Ljubljana, which is the capital. So when I get there, and this is based on 30 years experience, when I get there, I will see pictures as soon as I arrive. I'll walk into the piazza, the square, and I will see pictures. I'll paint pictures in my head. I'll have painted a dozen pictures the minute I step into that square. And I couldn't have done that years ago because all the pictures I paint in my head now are based on all the thousands of pictures that I painted over the years. So that kind of visual, ability, if you like, it's just based on experience. You can't teach it. You just have to have done thousands of pictures. You have to have spent years with a pen in your hand. You have to have a grasp of shape, composition, texture. You have to understand the process that you're going through. And
you have to have that vision first, then.
You have to have that vision first of all, and then all the skills come along, after that, really. So yeah, I was kind of painting the same picture in the sense it was based on an urban cityscape. It was based on being in a busy place. But I didn't have the vision to actually create the images that I'm creating now. I wanted to, but I didn't. I couldn't see it. It just wasn't there. And I think that applies to any artist. That there's things that, looking back, there's things that you can see. You can see kind of turning points in your career. You can see where certain things came along and everything just fell into place. So for me, for example, it was moving away from oil paints and going into watercolour. So for years and years and years, I painted in oil. And then as soon as I started on watercolour, it just suddenly liberated everything. It made everything more immediate and quicker. And it kind of meant I could work outside and I could then start incorporating the pen work as well. So it really freed me up. And then obviously along that way, you then start seeing other artists, the urban sketching movement that came along 10 years ago, and you see that there's actually tens of thousands of people around the world that are kind of trying to do the same thing that you're doing, and that's a real inspiring thing. So that kind of moves you forward. And then with things like social media, where you've got this platform for exhibiting your work, and you get loads of lovely feedback, again that spurs you on as well. So all those little things, when you track back, are all quite important things to help you arrive at the point, I suppose, where you are now.
So back when you were painting, say, in oils or watercolour, were you selling your work? Were you working professionally as an artist as well?
Yeah, I've always been really fortunate in that when I was at college, I started selling, and then when I left college, I've always been involved with galleries and agents and publishers. So I've always been quite kind of commercially switched on, and I've always been able to, sell what I do. I kind of sell enough. I sell everything I want to sell. But obviously when I'm running workshops and things like that, I try and keep a lot of stuff with me so I can show people examples. But yeah, everything I think I want to sell, I do sell. And I've had quite a long commercial career, and I've had lots of agents and publishers and galleries all over the country, and there's lots of galleries abroad now that sell my stuff. So in that sense, I've been really fortunate, being in the right place at the right time, and just having lots of good people around me, to support me. And I think as an artist, you need that.
So would you mind sharing with us a little bit of your process, your urban sketching process? Do you go straight in with a pen, for example?
It kind of varies, really. So if for example, I'm running a workshop, I have quite a specific process that I teach, although it can vary. It can vary massively depending on the subject. But what we try and start off with is we look at the big shapes. So if you turn up on a location and let's say for example you're in Trafalgar Square and you're looking at all the buildings around you, you just try and simplify those buildings into rectangles and squares and lines. So the first thing I would probably do with the students is say, look, let's just really simplify this. Let's get it on the page and let's think of the relationship between those shapes and the page, which is all about composition. And we'll use brush pens to do that. So brush pens are like felt tip pens, but they've got like a brushy tip. And then once we've done that, we'll then go inside those shapes. We'll populate those shapes with another layer of detail. So that rectangle might turn into a building. So you start putting the facade in. And then we'll put paint on. And then once the paint's dry, we'll then go in a bit deeper with more layers of detail. But every stage is linked to looking. So first of all, you look at the big shapes, then you look at the medium shapes, then you notice the colour, which brings in the emotional side, and then you start looking at the patterns and the textures. And it's a kind of like a 3-hour journey of looking. So you go from the big shapes, and then through that layering process, you go right down to the cracks in the pavements and the chewing gum on the floor and the dog poo in the grid. And it takes, and seriously, some of the places I've been to, you wouldn't believe how much dog poo there is. But it's going from that massive big shape, that big structure, in order to get it on your page.
And do you include the dog poo?
Oh yeah,
if
you look at some of my pictures on Instagram or on Facebook and you look really closely, you'll see so much dog poo, and you'll see cigarette butts as well, and you'll see all sorts of little things that you notice. And one of the things I try and teach when I'm doing these workshops is how urban sketching, unlike working in the studio, it's really good. I think it's good for the soul, and it's good for mental well-being, and it's good for mindfulness because it helps you to notice things, and noticing the little details are really good for you because it stops you from looking at a screen, it stops you from walking past something. It actually makes you stop and really see and really notice stuff, which I think is really good for you, and that's what I really encourage. So basically my workshop is a process of going step by step by step till ultimately you can start noticing things, you can start seeing things. And it might just be a cat in the window, or the pattern of a curtain in a window, or it could be a drain pipe, or it could be a bit of graffiti. It could be anything at all that you don't see at first. But the process of I take people through enables you to see these things. And I think that's a really cool thing to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the meditational thing about looking at dog poo. Totally.
You'd be surprised how beautiful you can make dog poo. You can just turn it into a little brown shape, you see. And if there's lots of them, then it becomes a pattern. I'll show you a picture sometime which is full.
And maybe we could have it for our show notes.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
Now you mentioned that it's 3 hours of sort of looking and layering. Now, a lot of people imagine urban sketching to be kind of going out there and creating these really fast sketches on location, which a lot of urban sketchers do. But clearly, you take a lot longer than that. So, do you, in general, if you're not on a workshop but on your own, do you normally complete them in one sitting, or do you take them back to the studio and fiddle around in there? How long sort of does it take?
Well, if I go out by myself, which I kind of don't often do now, because most of the time I go out, I've always got some people maybe coming along, with me to watch, or it's a workshop. But if I do go by myself, it won't take me 3 hours. It would probably take me just over two, maybe 2 hours. That's if I don't stop. But I would go through a kind of similar process to what I've just described. But the process is there to help you. So sometimes you might jump from one thing to another or go backwards and forwards. It just depends what the image necessarily needs. But yeah, it would take me a while, because I kind of don't do quick sketches. I used to do quick sketches years ago, and this is how the urban sketching thing started for me, because for years and years I was always taking my little sketchbooks on holiday with me. So we'd go to Ibiza, or we'd go to Mallorca, or we'd do a city break around Europe somewhere, and I'd always take my sketchbook and I'd just sit down for 10-15 minutes and I'd draw. But while I was drawing, running parallel with all these holidays, I was working in the studio and painting pictures in the studio. But the two never really I never thought of the two as coming together, because one was just me on holiday, chilling out, doing quick sketches, and the other was me in the studio making money. And it was only about 6-7 years ago that I realised that maybe I should just combine the two together and just start drawing and painting outside, because I had kind of the background. I knew how to paint and I knew how to draw, but I'd never really fused the two together. And then when I did, it was just like a real light bulb moment. It was like, wow, this is great. I can do this, and everybody loved me doing it. So my kind of regular commission work that I was doing for galleries suddenly changed, because they all then wanted me to use all the pen work as well as the watercolour. And then it just kind of naturally evolved from that. And then obviously I started running the workshops as part of the symposium and getting commissioned to do workshops kind of all over the world. And it's just kind of evolved from that. So the quick sketches have kind of gone by the by, because I don't do quick sketches anymore. Some people do, and I do kind of sometimes do a quick sketch. If I'm doing a workshop, what I might do is do a really quick little 2-minute sketch just to show people the composition. But then obviously we start the workshop, and my work ends up taking as long as everybody else's. But everybody on the workshop that comes on one of my workshops, their work takes just as long, because I force them to notice stuff. Said, you can't stop until you spot the chewing gum on the floor. Yeah.
So when you're painting in the studio versus when you're painting outside, do you use exactly the same process?
No. So there's when I'm in the studio, I'm in the studio at the moment, surrounded by all my stuff. When I'm in the studio, I obviously have to work from photographs, and I still do a lot of just watercolour paintings, but I don't really post them on social media. So you can find them, but you'd have to kind of go digging for them. But they're just watercolours, and they're on very, very heavily textured paper. They're all cityscapes still, and you could tell it's my work, but it's just got no pen work in. So I still do those, and that's like part of my kind of business, because I supply lots of galleries and agents, all over the country with them. But then I also do the stuff that most people know me by now, which is the pen work and the watercolour work as well. So I still do a huge amount of that. So the two are kind of running parallel, I suppose. But one is more commercial and obviously doesn't get shown much on social media.
So do you prefer the brush, using the brush pens, or would you rather go straight watercolour?
I prefer to do the work that you know me for, the urban sketches with the brush pens and the fine liners, because it just it just feels more natural for me. It's just the way I naturally want to work. It's how I see the world. I see the world in terms of lines and patterns and textures, and you can't achieve that just with paint. You need those fine lines, and I love the dark tone, which gives everything a bit of a lift, and all the grey tones as well, which calms everything down. So I think the tools that I'm using at the moment are just absolutely perfect for the way in which I want to kind of express the world around me. Yeah.
I've got a question here from Shelley Marlowe, and she wanted to know, do you have any tips for how to start drawing buildings for a beginner?
Okay. I suppose it depends on how much of a beginner you are. But if you're going to work from a photograph, which I think is so much harder than working outside, you have to kind of forget what the building is and just kind of simplify it into geometric shapes. So, for example, most buildings, if it's a front facade, it's going to be a square or a rectangle. So just look at the outside, look at the outline, and just get that on the page, and then look deeper into the picture, and kind of look at the windows, look at the shape of the windows, work out the proportion, the scale of everything, and then go deeper inside again and look at the patterns and the textures and the brickwork and the tiles and the drain pipes, and then look deeper again. And just notice, can you see any cracks, any shading, any texture? It's really a question of just looking and layering, but starting off very, 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 very simply. But if that's working from a photograph, if you're actually on location and you're experiencing it, it's totally different, and it's so much easier to teach on location, because when you're on location, you actually occupy the same three-dimensional space as what you're recording, so you can walk into the scene. So you're actually recording your experience, and you're recording time as well. So it's so much easier for me to teach somebody how to draw a building if they're standing next to me and the building's in front of us. Because what happens with a photograph is the photographs gives you everything all at once. It's like reading a book and you're trying to read every single page all at once, rather than starting, from the first sentence on the first page. And I think it's so difficult when people work from photographs. They get intimidated by photographs. Photographs do an awful lot of damage, I think, to people.
That's really interesting, because I think a lot of people would assume it would be easier to draw from a photograph. And you're saying it's not, so that's interesting.
I think a lot of people would say that if they've never been outside and tried to draw on location. Because a lot of people, you're absolutely right, a lot of people do assume it's harder being outside. But if you've done a lot of both, and I've done a lot of both, but I've probably done more outside, I've come to the conclusion that it's so much easier to be outside, because you're in the scene. When you're outside, you're actually in the scene. And you're drawing, or you're not drawing, but you're recording your experience of being there. So you can be a lot more selective in what goes in and what goes out, and not worry about it, because you've got no reference points. But if you're looking at a photograph, which is just a piece of technology, you can be quite intimidated by that, because you think, well, that's what the scene really should look like. So I've got to get the lines right. I've got to get the perspective right. I've got to get all this kind of stuff in. And a lot of the stuff that's in there is absolute crap anyway. It could be like, a lorry that's just rocked up, which is like really ugly. But if you're there on location, that lorry's going to move, isn't it? That lorry's not going to be there for 3 hours. Well, at least you hope it's not. So it's going to eventually move. So you draw through things, you draw past things, you draw behind things. You can really use your imagination in a way that you can't when you've got a photograph in front of you.
Photos actually distort sometimes as well the perspective anyway, don't they?
Yeah, they do, because a lot of the lines in perspective are a lot of the lines in a photograph, in terms of the perspective, run parallel with the edge of the photograph, which when in reality they don't look like that. You don't see it that way. It's totally different, and that's one of the things that I try and teach people. Because when people talk about my vertical lines, they all tend to kind of spray away, and people say, why are the lines not straight? I say, well, they're not straight because you don't see them straight. They might be straight if you took a photograph of them, because that's how the camera contorts everything. But in reality, you don't see them as straight lines because they're actually moving away from you. And it's hard to explain that unless you're actually there. But sometimes what I do is I walk into the scene and I point to a vertical line. And let's go back to the old example of a drain pipe, which I mentioned before. But a drain pipe, if it's over to your left, if it was a photograph of that drain pipe, it probably would run parallel with the edge of the photograph. So it would go perfectly vertical. But in reality, when you see it, it would actually go from the right, but as it goes up, it would move further over to the left. And that's how you actually perceive it in reality. But you can't explain that unless you're there. And you can walk in and you can touch the drain pipe and you can put your hand up the drain pipe, and then as it goes up, it will move over to the left. Not in reality. Well, it depends where you are. You know, if some drain pipes are a bit crooked, but actually in reality, as you look at it, it will actually move over to the left-hand side. And that's why my lines in my pictures they look slightly distorted, but they're not. That's kind of how it is.
I wanted to ask about exaggeration. Do you encourage people to exaggerate in drawings, or are you going for truth?
Wow. Oh my God, that is a huge question. What is truth? What is truth? Blimey. You see, truth comes back to the photograph, doesn't it? Because people would say if you're working from a photograph, the photograph is truth, but it's not. Because in a photograph, time has completely stood still. It's a snapshot. Time is not moving forward. But if you're working on location for 3 hours, the truth is that you're living and breathing in that space for 3 hours. So in that time, your truth, if you want to call it that, is going to change, because you're going to start off when you get there and you're probably going to be a little bit nervous and you might feel a little bit cold. But gradually, the sun might come out, you might warm up, you might feel a bit more confidence, you might have more people around you. Somebody might come along and say, "Oh my God, that drawing is amazing. Are you an artist? Oh, that's fantastic." And suddenly you feel good about yourself, so your confidence starts to grow. And then you start seeing things, you start seeing more things. You know, you start seeing colours and shapes that you didn't notice at first. So the truth of it is not about trying to capture the photographic reproduction. The truth is you being on location and being true to what, not just what you're seeing, but what you're feeling and all those experiences that are coming back at you all the time. So you're kind of living and breathing in the moment, and that moment goes on for 3 hours. And in that time, you'll start seeing more things. It's like my drawings are a record of me telling a story of me being in that location for 3 hours or 2.5 hours, or, you know, however long it might be. And in that time, I'm starting to see so many more things. I'm like unpicking all those layers. So the truth is about me being there for 3 hours and noticing stuff, seeing things.
So it's almost like a passage of time rather than just a snapshot that you get, you know, from a camera.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And you can't get that from a photo. You can only get that from being there, which is, I think, why it's such a magical, brilliant thing to do.
I think as well, for beginners, I think one of the reasons they don't like to go out and sketch at first is because they're too frightened of people coming up and saying, "Oh, that's not very good."
Absolutely,
I would say the chances of that happening are almost nil, but it's still a fear, isn't it?
It is. No, you're absolutely right. But you see, that's why the urban sketching groups are so good, because there's groups all over the world, as you probably know, and they meet at least once a month. And the Liverpool group, which I'm a member of, we have about 40-50 members that meet regularly. So there's always somebody, you know, to keep you company, because it can be quite intimidating, because I think you always assume that somebody's going to come along and they're going to be like an art critic, and they're going to maybe, you know, say something, you know, really kind of unpleasant about what you're doing. Can I tell you a little story?
Yeah. Go for it.
It's a true story, this, and this is why urban sketching on location is so cool, because you just don't quite know who you're going to meet. But I was drawing in Liverpool a couple of years ago, and I was drawing one of the museums, and this young lad came up to me, but I had my headphones on listening to music, and I didn't really engage with him. I just noticed he was sitting next to me. But as he was sitting next to me, he was absolutely fascinated by what I was doing. And every time I leant forward to pick up a different pen, he was like just scrutinising my pens, and he was really interested in all the different brushes I was using, and he kept leaning forward, to look at all my colours and everything like that. So I'm thinking, oh, he must be an art student. But he was absolutely fascinated by what was going on. Anyway, after about 10 minutes of watching what I was doing and just really, really engaged in what was going on, he taps me on the shoulder. So I took the headphones off. I thought, he's going to ask me, like, where'd you buy your paints from, what brand of paints, what brushes you use, and blah, blah, blah. So I took my headphones off, and he turns around and he says to me, what are you doing? He'd been watching me for 10 minutes, watching every single thing I'd done, scrutinising all my brushes, and he goes, what are you doing?
What was your answer to that?
I didn't know what to say. Honestly, I was completely floored. I thought he was like an art student who was going to say to me, what brand of paint is that? But he said, what are you doing? And I didn't know what to say. I think I just put my headphones on and carried on listening to Pink Floyd. Honestly, I couldn't believe it. It was just incredible.
Oh, that's so funny. So you go out into the big wide world and you're faced with all of these buildings and everything around you. So how do you go about choosing, a composition then? Because that's the hard part, isn't it? How do I go about getting my composition, getting it on the page and planning it so it all fits?
Okay, well, I think there's a lot of factors you need to take into account. And one would be, finding somewhere comfortable to sit. So you've got to have a comfortable spot. And a lot of people try and choose to sit up against the wall, so people can't come behind. So often that has a lot to do with it. And also, traffic as well. I mean, some of the best places to draw would be right in the middle of a busy street, but you're not going to last more than 2 seconds, are you, before a bus comes and kills you. So you have to be kind of mindful of kind of safety. Also, you can't...
The value of your paintings would go up, though.
Yeah. I mean, also, you've got to be careful you're not sitting outside somebody's shop or, just where you're going to get in. I mean, I'm always getting in people's way. I often go to Chester. Chester is really busy. It's full of shoppers. And I'm always sitting right in the middle of all the shoppers. And they get really annoyed because all they want to do is shop and they're not interested in, some scruffy artist sitting there drawing a building or something. So I'm always getting in people's way. So you have to be mindful that you kind of, you're not going to disturb anybody. But as I said before, I'm quite good at painting pictures in my mind. So I'm kind of used to choosing subjects that I know are going to work for me, and they've got all the kind of elements that I'm looking for. So one of the things that I often teach, I always teach this on location, is the use of space in your pictures. So you've got to have a lot of space, either in the picture or around the picture or both, where the picture can breathe, because some parts of your picture are really excessively populated with stuff, with detail. So in order for that to work, there's got to be a lot of other areas where you're not doing that much to give it a nice balance. So I'm kind of looking for things like that, where there's a lot of space going on. I don't mean like real space you can walk into, but I just mean gaps where there's like nothing that you're going to draw. So that's one kind of key thing. I love the buildings, but I also love, the cobbles and the cracks and the pavements, because I like the fact that people can potentially walk into one of my pictures. So it's got a really nice kind of surface at the bottom with maybe a few little grids and stuff like that. That always works really, really, really well. But also, so when I go somewhere, like for example, I'm going to New Orleans in November. What I try and do, because I'm there for about a week, I try and create a whole body of urban sketches, which kind of, in some ways, epitomise the city. So I will do all the greatest hits. So I will do the French Quarter, and I will do Bourbon Street, and I'll do all the amazing, like, colonial architecture, because what I want to try and do is kind of say something about the place, about me being in this place, but also make it quite typical of that place. And the same thing will happen next week when I'm in, Slovenia, and I've just come back from Italy, and we did a tour of Italy. So all the kind of Italian scenes of all the places that we went to, I try and create if you like, not the greatest hits, but the places that in some ways represent what I've experienced, what I've seen. So I wouldn't do just a completely off the beaten track, ordinary kind of building. It would have to be something that was saying something about the place. So we did the last two workshops I did in Italy were in Pompeii, in the ruins of Pompeii, which was great because that said so much about the place and about the history of the place. And I made sure that we had Mount Vesuvius in the background. Even if it wasn't there, I kind of dragged it about 6 miles across the horizon to make sure it fitted in with the picture. So it's that kind of thing. And that goes back to what you said before about, exaggeration and using your imagination, because you want to make sure you're really expressing something about the place.
I suppose for you, you needn't take a camera then, really, because, you can take so much in by drawing something, more than you can ever take by looking at it and then taking a snapshot and walking away. So presumably you don't have any photo albums, you just have all your drawings.
Well, we do have photo albums because it's nice to photograph the family as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You don't draw people really so much.
Well, I do. Funnily enough, I do, because I'm glad you asked that question, because my pictures are full of people, but you just can't see them.
Yeah.
So my pictures are a bit like a stage set for people, but they're like actors, but they've just moved off. They've gone off the side, but everything is there for them. So everything that they would need is there. So if there's a sign for them to read, it'll be in the picture, or a street light, or traffic light, or a doorway, or a window. So everything is there for them, even the chewing gum on the floor. But the people just aren't there because they don't keep still. And also, it's a record of looking at something for a long time, and they're just not going to keep still for me.
So I was just going to ask you another thing about your composition. I saw it in a video you did. You actually laying pens down on the paper.
Yeah. That's.
Is that one of your hot tips? I shouldn't be giving away.
Oh no, I don't mind explaining that.
Oh right, okay.
One of the first things the first thing I always do now on my workshops is before we even begin, we talk about the place and talk about what I'm going to include and what I'm not going to include and why I've chosen this subject, because I try and get all the students to work from the same viewpoints as me. So I don't encourage anybody to kind of go off or go around the corner. They all have to sit as physically close to me as possible, and we're all looking at the same view. So once we've chosen the composition, I will then walk into the scene and point out all the things that we're going to put onto this little piece of paper. And then the next thing we then do after we've talked about it is I'll get all the pens out and I'll place them on the page. And I'll only use maybe 6 or 7 pens, but it will just show the basic shape, which could be a rectangle or a square or some vertical lines or whatever it might be. And then they've got a reference point to those lines and what they refer to in reality. So what you then do is you just almost visually practicing before you've made a mark on the page, and it just helps people. It like throws a safety net over the activity. So before you started, you kind of giving people like a little bit of a guide into the composition. But the problem is, you take the pens off and you forget where they go.
Let's take a photo of it.
Yeah, take a photograph. Yeah. But no, it really does work, and everybody who I've taught that to then uses it themselves, and they find it really useful. So it might be your starting point could be a lamppost or a telegraph pole. So all you do is you place that pen where it needs to go, and it could be in the centre, or it could be off centre, or it could be tilted slightly. But then it just gives you that structure. So once you've placed a vertical pen on a piece of paper, you've then got space to the right, space to the left, and space above and space below. So you've then got 4 areas of space, and those 4 areas of space are much smaller now than the A3 space that you started with. So you can then look what's to the left, what's to the right, what's above, what's below. And then if you then put more pens within those spaces, before you know it, you're then referring to a very small part of the page, and then you can look into the scene and think what needs to go in that space. And that's essentially how I teach my workshops. We're just breaking up the spaces into smaller bits all the time. And it's all great until it comes to colour.
Actually, that's our next question, because we've got a question from Claire Dunphy in our group, and she'd like to know more about how you choose colours, because she says she always tries to pick what matches a scene, what she's seeing, but your drawings, she says, are full of splashes of colour.
Okay, how long have you got?
As long as you like.
Okay, this is a big one. So if ever I'm doing a workshop, this is the thing that everyone gets anxious about, I suppose is the word I'm looking for, because you've got local colour, which, as Claire said before, is the real colour. So you're looking at a scene and you've got a building which is kind of like brown. So that's local colour. It's got a red door. The door is red. That's local colour. That's the observed colour. So what I try and do, and this is kind of how I would teach it, I might do it slightly differently if I'm by myself, but I would say, right, this particular colour I can see in front of me, which could be a burnt sienna, that's my local colour, that's my starting point. So I know that the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint that brick wall or that roof burnt sienna. But I also, before I do that, before I've started with the burnt sienna, I'll then say, but there's also the emotional colour as well. And that's to do with how you feel about what you're doing and what you're looking at. And that's then also based on things like experience and confidence and your energy levels. And are you happy? Are you sad? Are you miserable? Are you feeling really good and confident? So there's a whole raft of emotions that affect the emotional colour. So once that burnt sienna goes on, I'll then probably bring in something else. And it could be another colour, which is to do with the emotional side. So it could be a different colour because I'm feeling energised or happy, or maybe a little bit kind of cautious, or maybe throw a blue in or something. But then you've also got how those two colours start behaving on the page. And it's really hard to explain this, but it's so easy to actually show people when I'm doing it. So that burnt sienna then needs something to play with, and it could be the blue, it could be an orange, it could be a Prussian blue, it could be something really vibrant, or it could be something really dark. And once those two start playing around, you're then kind of responding to those two colours, because they kind of then have a bit of a life of their own, and it's then letting them play all around the page. And then you start bringing in other colours, and then after a while you then might go back to local colour, and you might think, well, actually I need to kind of do that door because it's blue, and if I don't do blue it's going to be a bit silly. So it's a bit of a kind of a creative journey with colour, and it is very, very hard to explain on a podcast, but it's so easy to show people because they've got the colours to refer to. When I was in Italy doing a workshop, we did one of the workshops was about colour. So what I did is it was based on this place called Matera, which was the most beautiful Italian city. It's actually European capital of culture at the moment. And while we were there, they were filming the James Bond that comes out next year. But we did a painting just using two colours, burnt sienna and ultramarine. And that was a really useful exercise because it just showed the range of different colours you can get just out of those two, and you can kind of mix them together and get a really kind of dark tone, but then you can just use them on their own with lots and lots of water, and you can just play with them really. So that was quite useful. Yeah, that probably doesn't answer Claire's question at all.
I'm sure
I think it
does.
explains a lot, and now we can look back on all your paintings and we know how you felt when you paint them. We'll say, I was a bit flat that day.
Yeah, probably. But you know,
I was ultra happy that day.
Emotion, and this goes back to what I said before about when you're drawing on location, you're kind of living and breathing the space that you're in. So colour becomes very, very personal. But you can't do that in a photograph, because if it's a photograph, the photograph is dominating you. The photograph is screaming out at you saying, paint me, paint me, paint me, and use these colours, because if you don't, you're going to get it wrong. But when you're actually on location, you're not seeing a photograph, you're not seeing a flat surface, you're seeing space, and that space can be all sorts of different colours. depending on how you're feeling. And that's why the colour is so important in urban sketching for me, and it's so emotional as well. It's very much about, reproducing your experience of being there, but then also it becomes about making the picture as well, which I probably didn't mention before. So the picture itself will then start saying to you, I need a bit of this, I need a bit of that, because you're ultimately trying to, create a really visually interesting piece of art for other people to look at and hopefully to enjoy as well.
You're trying to convey as well what you're seeing, your vision in your head, and nobody else can see that. I mean, it's like, if you put 5 or 6 people in front of exactly the same thing and say, paint that, they're all going to paint it differently. They all see things differently. So that's, I think, as well, what makes it so personal, isn't it?
And isn't that a wonderful thing? Isn't that
It is.
Just so cool? I love that. I love that. And that's what I say to people on the course as well. When we do the review at the end and we have a throwdown and we go through everybody's work and we just look at everyone's vision. And even though they've all gone through the same steps, used the same materials, sat practically in the same spot as me, sometimes they're actually sitting on my knee as they're drawing, and they've all come up with something completely different. And I just love that. I think that's so cool.
I know you've mentioned before the tools you use, so you like brush pens. Are there specific brands or anything that you like, your favourite tools?
Well, there are. Am I allowed to say brands? Can I say that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, for the brush pens, I use the Tombow brush pens, and I'm sure there's plenty of other ones out there, but I found these in Australia a couple of years ago. Well, I didn't find them. I walked into an art shop and they were there, and I've been using them ever since. And they're great because they're dual tipped, so you've got a brush bit on one side and a fine liner on the other. They're water soluble, so it means you can draw on top of the paints, and it's really nice and compatible with the paints. I only ever use the grey tone, so I don't use the coloured one. So I use all the kind of mid greys and the light greys and the black. So I've got about eight different ones. So they're brilliant. So I use them at the very first stage for sketching out, and then I use them again after the watercolour. So I use the fine liner tip at the beginning to sketch out the composition, but then I use the brush side after the watercolour a bit later on to kind of calm down the colour and add depth and add tone and make it more realistic and three-dimensional and all that kind of stuff, really. Yeah. So I use them twice in the process, but I use obviously for completely different reasons.
Have you got favourite watercolours as well?
Well, I have. I'm on really dodgy ground here because
You've got a sponsor.
Yeah.
They're going to be from like £3 from the works or something.
Yeah, I've got a couple of sponsors, but my
You
favourite.
don't have to say if you don't want.
Oh no, I will, because you can always edit this out. But I don't know, you can decide. So I use Winsor & Newton because Winsor & Newton are my favourites. I've always used Winsor & Newton, but I'm also sponsored by a couple of other companies as well. So I occasionally use theirs, and I love theirs as well. Don't get me wrong, theirs are absolutely fantastic. So I'm happy using kind of whichever paints I can get my hands on, but as long as it's good quality. And also, yeah. I have when I go out with me on location, I have about 4 different sets of paints. I don't always take them with me, but I'll always take at least 2, and each set has got its own combination of colours in. So I've just got lots of different variety because I like to keep it as interesting and as exciting as I can. So I don't want to use the same colours all the time. So I sometimes open up the pot and say, oh, I've got you guys today. That's great. I didn't expect that. And that's nice. So it kind of keeps it interesting for me. So I don't kind of know which, it's like a lucky dip. I don't know which ones I'm going to take with me. Unless it's a workshop and it's a specific colour that we're going to be, doing in the workshop, I have to be a bit more sensible and serious about it then. But sometimes I'll just take whatever colours just happen to fall into my bag, and that's quite exciting for me as well. Yeah.
So when is your next workshop in the UK then?
Right. Well, I haven't really got many because most of them. Well, the thing is, I do a lot in the UK, but they're all done for kind of closed groups. So I kind of do them pretty much every week. I mean, I've got one tomorrow, I've got one on Thursday, and I've got 3 coming up over the next 3 days, but they're all for closed groups, so the tickets just get sold immediately because they get advertised locally. So the next one, which I think is open for anyone to try and get on, is going to be in Ireland. I'm doing, I think it's 8 or 9 days in Ireland.
Oh, wow.
And that's the end. That's the end of June.
That's not one workshop, is it?
No,
9
days. It's one
it's
workshop.
Several.
You get one every day. You get a load of demos. You get at least 2 demos, and you get about 7 workshops. And you get loads of other stuff as well. So that's the end of June, beginning of July. And if anyone's interested, the details will be on my website. So that's the only one in the UK, because all the others are abroad.
It's a bit chilly at the moment as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, you teach, obviously, in-person workshops, but then do you also teach online? Is there online sort of workshops that you do?
There's only
for people that come?
the only one that's up at I've done quite a few online ones, but they haven't gone live yet. But there's one that has gone live, and that's for Sketchbook School. So we did some filming for them last year, and that went live the end of last year. So if they go on the Sketchbook School website and probably just search me, that'll come up. But that was great. That was done in Liverpool, and that's broken everything down. So everything I've described for you guys today is demonstrated on the Sketchbook School class that we did. So it's me drawing on location, doing a cityscape, and then just breaking it down into the pen work, the paint work, the fine line of the detail, lots of layers of looking. And then there's also a few sketchbook tours that I do where I flip through my sketchbooks and tell people, lots and lots of really funny stories about things that happen to me on location, because there's so many funny things that happen to you when you're on location. It's just hilarious, the people that you meet and the things that that you come across. It's so funny. I mean, I've been attacked by old people before.
Attacked?
Seems to be one of my things. Yeah, I was in Porto last year. Can I tell you this little story?
Yeah,
I was in Porto last year, and it was the symposium, the International Drawing Symposium, and it was my first day there. So I was doing a few kind of warm-up sketches, and I'm sitting outside this apartment, just leaning against the wall, drawing the cathedral. And after about an hour, all this bread started landing on my page, and I thought, it's a big fat seagull up there, who's got a gob full of bread, and he's just dropping it, but it just kept on landing. So after a couple of minutes, I looked up, and there was this really old, and when I say old, she must have been about 120, little tiny wrinkled Portuguese lady leaning across the balcony, screaming at me in Portuguese, swearing at me, and chucking bread. And so I'm not great with Portuguese, so I hadn't got a clue what she was saying, but I knew she was really annoyed with me. So there was a taxi driver standing opposite me, laughing his head off, and he translated, and he said, basically, she's sick to death of seeing artists, because it was the symposium, so the city was full of artists. She's sick to death of seeing artists, hanging around her apartment drawing, and she wants you all to go. So I looked at her, and I'm 6'3", and she's about 5 foot, and I thought I could probably handle her, but that's not the point, is it really, when she's that old and she's a resident? So I thought, okay, I'll pack up and I'll just go. So I packed everything up, but as I'm packing up, she's still screaming at me, chucking bread at me. So I packed everything away, shoved everything in my bag, and I went off for a bite to eat, and then
Was it bread?
Yeah. So it got to about 8 o'clock at night, and I was desperate, to go back to finish my drawing off. And then I went back, but I was really frightened because I just didn't want to see her. I was like in that kind of frame of mind where all I wanted to do was make art. I didn't want a confrontation. I didn't want to get into trouble. I didn't want to upset this old dear. So when I got back, I crept round the corner and looked up at her apartment. And thankfully, all the lights were off. So I was hoping she'd gone to bed. So I sat back down and I did not make a sound. That was the quietest drawing I'd ever done. But as I'm drawing, I'm actually crapping myself, thinking at any moment now I'm going to get some bread landing on this page. So whenever I see this picture, I always think of that story, and that's what's
how
brilliant
funny
about doing this stuff outside, because you just get to meet people, see things, experience things. It's just great.
Wasn't that difficult though? Because if you went back like quite a long time later, then presumably the lights completely changed. How do you deal with that?
Well, I don't really draw lights. I just draw shape and pattern. I mean, light isn't a big thing for me anyway.
So you don't worry about where the shadows were and they are now, and you just...
No, I don't really put the shadows. I only put the shadows in if they're going to help the picture, but I'm not... I mean, some artists are fabulous. There's some brilliant artists.
You're not a slave to it.
I'm not... No, it's shape for me. Shape is always my starting point. Shape is the thing that I look for, and then after shape, it's pattern, and then after pattern, it's probably colour. So, it's always shape. It's just looking for really interesting shapes that are going to kind of express what I want to say. So the lights...
I suppose you could have used some of that bread to include some texture into your painting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what are your plans for the future?
Well, I mean, the next 18 months are pretty booked up with trips abroad, doing workshops and kind of sketching holidays, because I'm with quite a few travel companies, and they've invited me to go to all these like amazing places. So I'm off to New Orleans next month as well, and then we've got a load of trips next year. But my real plan, or my real ambition, is, I suppose, it's to create the best drawings I can. I mean, I love what I do, and I'm really determined to give it the best shot I can at creating the best sort of images that I'm capable of doing. And I just want to make them even better. I want to make them even more powerful, stronger. And I'm always looking for different shapes. I've got this amazing idea that I've not really shared with many people, but I'll tell you guys. I want to do. Are we allowed
to air it?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, because
good.
Yeah, because I'm going to put this idea out to a few other people and see where it comes. But I want to do an urban sketching tour along Route 66 in America.
Oh, fantastic!
Because no one's ever done that before. So the idea would probably be about a week. We wouldn't go obviously all the way from Chicago to LA, because that would just involve too much travelling. But we'd probably just stick to maybe something like New Mexico and Arizona, or Missouri, or somewhere like that. So Texas maybe, and maybe spend about a week, and then we just travel a little bit, and we just go along all of these small little towns that just evolved over the years, and a lot of them are kind of like quite abandoned and desolate now, and basically just do urban sketches based on all the street furniture, all the signage, all the abandoned cars outside, all the motel signs, because some of the motel signs are so wacky, they're just incredible. And all the kind of tumbleweed in the background, and the iconic American cars, and that would just be so brilliant to do. It would just be such good fun. So that's one of my things on my bucket list. And the other thing I really want to do as well is I want to go to Jerusalem, because I'm really interested in a lot of the history and the imagery that you would find there. So that I think there's a lot of really interesting things you could do with a city like Jerusalem. Obviously, you've got all the different religions and how they're represented, and I think that would be a really interesting place to go to. I'm going to New York next year, and I've got loads of kind of ideas about what I want to do in New York. I'm going to be running some workshops in New York itself, in Manhattan, and then I've got like a week's workshop upstate where I'm going to do some more stuff as well. So I'm looking forward to that. Because all these places that I've mentioned, they're just going to enable me as an artist to move forward. Not so much in terms of the way I put the images together, but it's more about what I can say, the storytelling that I can bring out. It's kind of all picking the layers, so you're going deeper and deeper and deeper into the subject to say something about the fabric of the place that you're representing. So if you do a sketch, you're not just recording it objectively, you're actually digging an awful lot deeper into it. So, for example, going back to Route 66, you can say an awful lot about those places and about how they've evolved over the years and the situation they find themselves in now. and the signage. I think signage is just fascinating, how things are advertised. You know, how that the lettering, the abstract nature of letters are then incorporated into a scene with space and depth and foreground and background. I find that ambiguity really interesting. Yeah. So,
have you ever been to Bath?
Yeah, I have. I got lost. I was driving through and I got lost there once. Yeah, but I've never kind of spent much time there. No.
Oh, no. I've just come back from there last weekend, and it was just unbelievable for buildings, and the Roman baths are so... I mean, you would love it there. I know that it's not Route 66, but it's absolutely... it's probably the most stunning place I think I've been in this country.
Yeah.
Really beautiful. Yeah. It's definitely worth a look if you know, for people that love sketching buildings.
Yeah.
Fantastic place. Anyway, so where can people find out more about you?
Well, obviously I post pretty much everything I do goes on Instagram. So they can find out all the stuff that I'm up to on Instagram. On my website, there's a section which has got trips, holidays, workshops. So if they click on that tab, it's on the homepage. It drops down and they've got all the kind of trips. But the thing about the trips is they're all kind of like booked up, really. They get booked up really quickly. Facebook's always quite good. I always post a lot of stuff on Facebook, and any kind of adverts that are coming up for things, for trips, I post on Facebook. But probably my website is the best. And also there's loads of stuff on YouTube now. There's loads of little, snippets of me doing stuff on YouTube and kind of advertising things as well. So there's an awful lot of things out there, and I don't think I'm that hard to find, really.
So your website, it's ianfennelly.co.uk, isn't it?
That's it, yeah.
We'll put the link on the show notes anyway. But it's been absolutely joy to speak to you, Ian. It really has.
Thank you
so much. It really has been lovely.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and hopefully you can come back another day and tell us when you get back from Route 66.
That would be lovely. That would be so nice. And thank you for having me on as well. It's been great. It's been really nice being able to talk about all my stuff as well. So thank you.
No, you're very welcome. It's been lovely. All right, well, we'll let you get back to your evening, and hopefully we'll speak to you again.
Okay, thanks girls. Thanks Sandra. Thanks Tara.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, perhaps you'd like to share it and leave a review for us on iTunes. Back soon.
Is this going live, or is it just being? Oh, okay. So we can completely things up and talk absolute, and you can just edit it all out.
And you can even say, and I can edit out. It's fine.
It's too late. I've said it now.